Today is May 8, 2024. I'm Larry McClure, and we're sitting here today with Greg Pickering, Tualatin's 4th police chief. Over the years, Greg has lived here quite a while. Greg, you grew up over here in Apache Bluff, and that's been a great place to grow up. I know you now live in Newburgh.
Correct.
But you're close enough to keep your eye on our city, and we're glad to have you here. What were your early years like in Tualatin? Where did you go to school? Some of those experiences. What did you do? Where did you hang out?
Yeah, so born and raised here in Tualatin. My parents moved into Apache Bluff, actually into the model home of Apache Bluff in 1970, in the early years of 1970. I was born in 1975 here in town, and so I'm truly a product of this community. I was lucky enough to attend Tualatin Elementary when it was in the old building that was on Boones Ferry Road, and was, like most kids in that era, was a product of Mrs. Andrews' first grade class, as so many of us were. Shortly after that, when Bridgeport Elementary was constructed over off of Borland Road, I was in the second grade class. That was at Bridgeport, and my older brother was in the 6th grade class. So we got to be some of the first to see the other side of Tualatin at that point, on the other side of the freeway. The neighborhood was an amazing neighborhood to grow up in. At that time, there wasn't much past Jurgens Road. It was strawberry fields, where most of us in the neighborhoods would pick strawberries. My brother was the field manager for a couple of years as a 13 or 14-year-old, and several of us young kids had to go get our work permits to go fill up strawberry flats for the Lee's family, which was, in a great time as growing up here in town. I attended Tualatin Junior High, as Hazelbrook wasn't constructed yet, and was fortunate to be part of the last combined graduating class at Tigard High School, as Tualatin High School was just being constructed. So Tualatin at the time was a great community to grow up in. Playing on the sports teams sponsored by Blue Mountain Dog Food and the Tualatin Pharmacy and the Tilke family. It was a really fun community back when, remember the days when the Crawfish Festival had the security force that was the Brother Speed motorcycle gang, and the parades that would go downtown. The community itself was very tight knit back in those days, and I think we still hold a lot of those today, those same values as a community today. What is now Izumi's was Sunshine Pizza, which was an incredible hangout. And many people don't remember that what is to the Tualatin Station Tavern used to be an arcade. It was a 2-level arcade full of quarter video games, and many Fridays and Saturday nights, it was close enough to walk from our neighborhood there. So many of us, young kids would venture down to the arcade and spend time there.
So were there some things you did in those days that now, as a police chief, you would say, uh-oh?
Well, there were several things. We, especially the Apache Bluff neighborhood, we truly lived what they would call the Gen X lifestyle, where we were out when the sun came up, and everybody came home when the street lights came on, and so many of those friends and families in those neighborhoods, the parents were connected, the kids were connected. We really just ran around as a kind of a small pack of kids running around. I venture to say there was a few nights that we snuck onto the golf course and ran around, and usually on snow days there was a couple of I believe it's the 8th or 9th fairway in the back. That's a great hill to sled on. So there was a few days where we might have spent some time on the country club. Tualatin was still, for the most part, past Boones Ferry Road or past Jurgens Road was farmland. And so there was many days of running through the orchard that was on the, which was a rather large orchard on the corner of 108th and Tualatin Road, and running around the neighborhoods down by the Tualatin River, and many days swimming in the river, throughout the area. So yeah, it was a fun time, but the nice thing about this community, and especially the Apache Bluff, was, you know, there was 15 other moms that were, you know, like your mother, that were not afraid to make the phone call to your mom or dad to let them know, or to scold you when you were getting out of line. So it was a really fun neighborhood to grow up in, and actually I still talk to several of the kids that grew up in that neighborhood, and we still connect from time to time. So
good. So how did you get the notion of going into police work? When did that first pop in your mind?
You know, I think it was junior high, late junior high. One of the teachers asked a group of us to be on a group that went to the elementary schools to talk about saying no to drugs and alcohol. And I think that was the first time I kind of got the idea. We had the first school resource officer that came to Tualatin Junior High, was Officer Randy Cafis, who actually was from the Tualatin Police Department. And Randy was an incredible police officer and was an incredible school resource officer. And I think that was the first time where it kind of got into my brain of like, hey, like I like what he does and how he does it. I was in high school when I heard of the Explorer program through the Tualatin Police Department. And in early 1993, there was an informational meeting at the old council chambers, and I went with my dad and we listened in, and I said, this is what I'm going to do. And I was accepted into the Explorer post the next month. And from 1993 till 1997, when I was hired full time, I spent probably close to about 2,000 hours of volunteer time riding around, learning how to be what it was going to be like to be a police officer. And I knew at that point it was my calling. It was what I was supposed to do. It's what I was put on this earth to do. And it's been a great career ever since. So.
Great. So did you have to go after high school and it's a special training or school or college?
Yep. So I attended Portland Community College and Chemeketa Community College to get some education. And it just worked out at the time that I had an opportunity to become a reserve police officer, which is a non-sworn police officer, but with arrest powers. So we dressed like a normal police officer, but we would ride with a sworn police officer at the time. And in 1997, I got the opportunity to go to the Tigard Police Department as a community service officer, which we have a community service. So the low-level crimes that have no suspect information, do the parking complaints, abandoned vehicle type of things. And I did that actually for about a month and a half before the Tigard Police hired me full-time. So I started my career in early 1998 in Tigard and spent 8 years there until 7.5 years until early 2005 when Chief Barker at the time convinced me it was time to come home. And I came back to the Tualatin Police Department in 2005.
Great. So what was your first position here in Tualatin?
So when I came back, well, my first position, I was a police explorer, and then was actually I can say I had the honor of being the first ever reserve police officer for the city of Tualatin. So the program was created in early 1996, and at that time, myself and TJ Hahn, who was another name that grew up here in Tualatin, we were turning 21 and aging out of the Explorer program. And had the ability to become reserve police officers here for Tualatin. So we were the first two ever reserve police officers for the city of Tualatin. And then when I came back in 2005, I came back as a patrol officer. It had spent 7.5-ish years in Tigard and held some pretty incredible positions as a field training officer, which is an officer who trains new officers as they come in. I spent time in detectives, and then my final position at Tigard was a traffic motor officer, riding a motorcycle every day, and which, my wife may not agree, but I think was the best job in the police department. That was a great place great opportunity to work on a motorcycle, and had a great schedule, working Monday through Thursday and working 7 to 5. And then came back to Tualatin and went directly back to night shift and spent the next couple of years working graveyard shift, which was not super popular with my wife. But it was a great opportunity to come back home and come back to what I consider to be my home agency. Shortly after that, I went into the schools and spent about 1.5 years as a school resource officer, primarily at Hazelbrook Middle School, but also spending some time at Tualatin High School. which was a great opportunity for me because allowed me to get back into coaching high school football. And so I coached both on the freshman staff and on the varsity staff at Tualatin High School for a couple of seasons until I was promoted to sergeant. And then got to go back to night shift as a new patrol sergeant. But which has allowed me to continue now to coach high school football. So I do get the opportunity to coach at Tualatin High School still as in my 9th season as an assistant coach up there at the high school.
Were you playing when you were in high school?
I did play at Tigard High School. Yeah, it was a great experience. I got to play. What got me back into coaching was I got to play for Craig Haston, who was at Tualatin and Tigard High School and Tualatin High School for many years, and played with his son Rob, who he and I are very close. And when I came back to the Tualatin Police Department, Rob was the head coach at Tualatin and brought me back on staff and got me back into coaching. So it was a great experience and a great opportunity to be with one of my closest friends, but yet have the ability to have an impact on the young athletes here in Tualatin.
Well, who were some of the mentors in your police career that really were influential?
Yeah, so there's so many. The nice thing about an agency like Tualatin is when I started in 1993, they were still only 17 or 18 police officers. There was the original 12 that started the police department in 1987, who all came from Washington County Sheriff's Office. Most of those 12 were still here. And they were an amazing group of officers at the time. There was 2 in particular that were probably the closest for me, and that they were Officer Mark Gardner and Officer Larry Braxma, 2 of which who both retired from the Tualatin Police Department over the last couple of years. But those were two guys that were really instrumental in my success in my career. Early on in my career, actually in 1996, my father passed away from cancer. And I was a typical 21-year-old kid kind of floundering of what do you do now that my dad's passed away. I was very close with my father, with both of my parents, and not really knowing what to do. And so you kind of find that crossroads where I've now dealt with this traumatic death of my father, and do I take this path or I do take this path? And I had the opportunity to spend a lot of time in a police car with several different officers, and they were truly mentors to my career path and to my staying on the good path and following, where my future was taking me. So I owe a lot to the men and women of the Tualatin Police Department at that time, because they really were my support system and my ability to continue through this career.
Well, what were some of the challenges you had to face in those first years that you remember?
Well, I think some of the challenging portions of my early career was policing, being a police officer in the town you grew up in, and running into people that I'd run around with as kids, people that I'd known for pretty much all of my life, and now being in a different role was some of the challenging times. I tried my best to treat everybody that I dealt with dignity and respect. There was several times where it was somebody that I knew or had an acquaintance with, or it was a parent or a relative of somebody that I grew up with. And you're dealing with those people typically on a terrible day for them, for whatever reason that might be. And so just trying to find the ability to be, respectful and knowing that there was history with a lot of these people, and they knew me and I knew them, and I lived in Tualatin in the same house that I grew up in. After my father passed away, my mom moved back with her family in the Hood River Valley, and I moved into stayed in our my childhood home, and so everybody knew where I lived. Everybody knew where I was, and so there wasn't I didn't have a lot of the ability to escape some of that. So it was really imperative and crucial to be as much of a community police officer as I could be, and that was challenging at times.
Well, over the years, what have been some of the scariest things that you had to face?
Man, as much of a great community as Tualatin is, we do see from time to time, we do see crime. I was very early on in my career. Actually, I was doing an internship while I was in college when there was we had a discovery of human remains at a storage unit in Tualatin, and I was a young 20-year-old kid and got to attend my first autopsy. And I, not that was a highly charged event, but walking into the medical examiner's office the first time when you're finding human remains, it's a little daunting in the beginning when you're still trying to figure things out. We've had several incidents in Tualatin, and back in 2005, I was involved as an officer in a deadly use of force situation, where we train all the time for what these situations look like, but when you see the muzzle flash of a gun when you're being shot at, it's an interesting experience. I was the patrol sergeant that was in charge of the shift on November 10th, 2009, when we had what was deemed to be an active shooter at the Legacy Labs here just near the Fred Meyers. That was an incident where, at the time, rolling to that as a sergeant, figuring, this was going to be an incident that was going to, it was being called in as an active shooter situation. And so those incidents, are incidents where they stick with you. They're incidents where you remember, the response and what goes through your mind as you're responding to those situations. So
I'm sure you've run into very sad situations in the past also.
Yeah, people don't call the police when they're having a great day. And a lot of times, we are the ones that show up on people's worst days. And there's, attending anytime, we respond to a suicidal call or the death of a child or, somebody who's, died at the hands of another, be it through a violent act. Those situations are those that, as human beings are really tough. And it's hard on a lot of those situations to show up, and we have a job to do. And so you have to put your emotions aside and you have to set those things away, and it's time to be professional and to do the job that we do. As a traffic officer, one of my first fatal traffic crashes that I responded to was the death of a 2-year-old boy that had been hit by a car, and it was a very traumatic scene. Family members everywhere. It was a pretty busy street in Tigard, and the family was actually an immigrant family that had just moved to the Tigard area from Vietnam, and it was a very interesting investigation to work, because there was a lot of distrust of the government and a lot of distrust of the police department. So I had to work very closely with the family to assure them that we were doing everything that we needed to do. And it was a very lengthy, drawn out investigation, because we had to make sure that everything was, all the T's were crossed and I's were dotted in the right way. The interesting part of that is the family actually invited me to the funeral of the young boy, and I attended the funeral. And it was, growing up, a believer in Christ and a Christian here in town, it was a Buddhist service, and I had never been exposed to a Buddhist service before. So to attend as a police officer in uniform to this service was probably one of the most memorable parts of my career. To see just this young boy and how the family honored him, and how this it was different from what I had seen in the past, and it was very eye-opening. And I think I grew a lot as a police officer to just see how impactful our response can be, and how we do have to take that extra time from time to time to make sure that we're doing things correctly, we're doing things right, and it's so important that we do things with the utmost respect and courtesy, even if we have to use force or do things that we may not want to do as police officers. It's our job to do them in the most professional way possible.
So are there some other rewards and satisfactions that you have personally had from this career?
Oh yeah, I've been super fortunate in my ability. I've been a trainer of police officers for over 20 years. I've been a driver training for what we call emergency vehicle operations, and I've been a firearms instructor teaching officers the use of firearms for several years. Both of those opportunities have opened doors for me to teach at a national level. I've had the opportunity to teach all over the country. I'm currently involved in a group called the International Association of Law Enforcement Firearms Instructors, and I have the opportunity, I'm on their board of directors, and have the ability to teach on a yearly basis to police officers from around the world and around the country at different locations. So that is very rewarding. It's very rewarding to teach a class on a certain weapon system, say on a pistol class, and have somebody from the middle part of the country say, hey, can I have your lesson plan? And to know that what we're teaching here in Tualatin is being taught in other parts of the country because of these opportunities. And so that's one of the things that I hold near and dear is the ability to train our officers and officers in our region, but also officers around the country.
So after becoming police chief, just how did life change for you all of a sudden? You were an officer before, and now you're in an elevated position.
Yeah, well, I don't go anywhere without my phone, I can tell you that. I carry 2 phones because my phone rings all the time. Being the chief in a town like Tualatin, we're super accessible. And that's, I think, part of the benefit is that, I do shop at the stores here. My son still goes to Tualatin High School. Like, we're part of the community still, and we are a community police department. And it's my job to be a community police chief and to be accessible. And that's a lot of work. There's a lot to that. There's a lot of meetings and a lot of things to attend. But again, to be responsive to our constituents here in town. And, we're a public service organization, and that's our job, to be public servants. And it's my job to be accessible to those community members when they have questions or concerns or the emails that come in. So it's at times daunting with several emails and phone calls, and typically I'm the person that gets the phone call when somebody's not happy. And so it's time to sit and explain, and I might not give them the answer that they want, but at least I'm going to give them the time and the ability to sit and listen and then hear our perspective of how things went down or how things were handled in that situation.
So what problems or issues keep appearing on your priority list nowadays?
Yeah, so I think, stuff that we have to deal with, we have, our society, and I don't want to say just our community, but our region struggles with adequate services for our community members that suffer from mental health issues and from our addiction problems. What we constantly see is crimes that occur from people who are in crisis, either a mental health crisis or an addiction crisis, which leads them to the small petty thefts or to camping in places they're not supposed to camp in, which can be considered livability issues for those community members that are here. And so it's our job to really do our best to find those services that we can and to put people in touch with those services. The unfortunate side is they're late to the table, right? We're still suffering from a lack of adequate mental health facilities in our region. We're still suffering from a lack of a critical triage or detox center for those that are under the influence. So those are the biggest challenges that our officers face, I think, on a routine basis, is how do we help those who need help, but we don't have necessarily the resources that they need right now. So we rely a lot on our hospital, we rely a lot on our partner agencies around. The county's doing a better job, and they're working really hard to try to fill some of those gaps. But right now, when we want to provide the best service and opportunity for those people that we can, it can be difficult when those services are full, or the shelters are full. The shelters in Portland, the shelters in our region are full, and so it becomes a challenge for our officers on a daily basis.
So would you say some of the same problems that we hear about in Portland and have for many years are now here and have always been here, maybe on a lesser degree?
Yeah, I think on a lesser degree. I think they've always been here. I think we've always had a contingent of those that have been homeless or houseless or a transient type population. We've had those people around town for many years. I don't think we see the same homeless crisis that they do in other communities close to us. But one thing that I've heard for many years is we do have those that are homeless, but they stick around and they do their best to kind of stay hidden because they know that we leave them alone. And we do treat them well when we do encounter them, and try to do the best we can to provide the services that are available, though limited. We do our best to try to provide what we can for them.
So we're here in May of '24. What are the most important issues your officers face. You said mental health is one of those?
Yeah. So mental health, I think, is the big one. The mental health crisis that we have in our communities around the region, I think, is probably the biggest thing that we deal with right now. There's not a ton of resources for help for those people who are in crisis. And so that's typically when the police officers get the phone calls. We're trained as police officers to respond to those situations. We've done a lot of work within our agency to train our officers in the response to mental health, but we're not clinicians. We're not mental health workers. And so a lot of times just the presence of a police officer can make the situation more heightened. And so we have to really deal with, treading lightly into those situations to not, our biggest thing right now is to not re-traumatize somebody who's been dealing with their crisis. And how do we do that effectively? And how do we do that in a way that we continue to provide the best service that we can provide to our community, but do so in a way that keeps everybody safe, including the officer and the community member that we're dealing with.
So in the instance of drug abuse, you carry things like Narcan, and I heard you had carry food in the cars sometimes too for help?
We do, yep. We carry food packs in our cars. We do, every officer does carry Narcan on them, and we have Narcan. Almost every one of our patrol cars has an AED. That's one thing that I think the Tualatin Police Department has held very near and dear is our partnership with our fire side of the service here. We have a very close relationship with TVF&R, and our officers really take to those CPR calls as a true emergency call for service. And our officers do an amazing job of getting on scene and using our AEDs. And in the time of addiction or overdose situations, we do have Narcan, and it is deployed pretty frequently, unfortunately, in our area. There's the legislation that's now moving to recriminalize narcotics in this state. I think, although it's controversial, I think it is providing pathways for people to get into treatment, which is the most important thing that we're doing. I think that's the most important part of this. Part of the law is making the diversion process easier to get people out of the criminal justice system and into the treatment system where they need to be, so they can hopefully deal with their addictions, which then hopefully stems the other issues that come along with that.
So what are the parts of your job that take the most time for you today?
Well, as the chief, really what it is just that connection with the community. It's the answering the emails and the phone calls and attending the meetings and being accessible is probably what takes the biggest amount of time. We have an amazing staff at the Tualatin Police Department. I have two captains that do an amazing job of the day-to-day operation of the organization. One runs the patrol division, one runs our services division, which is our records department and our property and evidence and our detective division. They do an amazing job of the day-to-day operations that happen all the time. My job as the chief is that piece of the expectations. Like, here's what I expect, and here's what we need, and it's my job to do the best to manage those expectations, both internally and externally, and that can take an immense amount of time.
How many folks are on your staff these days?
So currently we have 38 sworn officers. We're authorized for 40. So we are down a couple of bodies, and always in the hiring process to try to keep up with where we are. We're a relatively young agency. We had 2 retirements last year, and we're kind of holding strong for another couple of years till we'll see another wave of retirements. But through attrition and lateral officers moving around the region, we are down 2 positions right now. So hiring is one of our biggest priorities that we're constantly working on, trying to find the best and the brightest. One of the mantras that we use is we hire people for character. We want to hire the best human beings that we can hire, and then we'll train you to be a police officer. We are still a community police department. We do want to be at the community events. We try to have officers out all the time, and again, we are a metro city, but we're still Tualatin, and we still want the opportunity for people to know our names and know who we are and what we do, and so we're always looking for the right human beings with the best character that we can find, and then we'll train them to be a police officer.
I've noticed personally several women police officers out working. What's the balance on that?
Yeah, so Currently, we have four women who are officers here in Tualatin. All of them are spectacular at what they do, and they do a great job of just being a great, again, great human beings who do great work in our community. And we want our community, we want our police department to reflect the community that we are. So we encourage anybody and everybody to come and join our ranks. So.
How about languages? Do you face that sometimes? Different languages being spoken? We
do. Yeah, we have three officers who are native Spanish speakers, and those guys are busy. A third of the city of Tualatin now is Spanish speaking, and I think we're seeing even more diversity coming in. So there are times when we have services that we contract with that if we have to do translation over the phone to try to make this work. But yeah, we do have three native Spanish speakers, and those guys they actually spend a lot of time at a lot of our community meetings and as well, because again, we want to provide that service to those that maybe don't speak English.
So you mentioned earlier the school resource officer that you were once and others you saw as a young person. Do we still have those in our schools today?
We do. We have two current school resource officers. So we have one at the high school and one at the middle school, and I'll tell you that program is invaluable. It's probably one of the best programs that we have in the police department. Those two officers do amazing things with the young people in our community, just through their interactions on a day-to-day basis. They're always in the schools, they're always interacting with the kids, they're in the hallways, they're making the connections with the kids, and even in those situations where they do have to take enforcement actions, which some people would say, but it's surprisingly not as many times as we think there are. We just had a presentation from the juvenile department in Washington County, and it's less than 20% of the referrals that go to the juvenile department actually come from the schools. So they do a really good job of, I think, not only deterring criminal action at the schools, but also just being involved with those kids and maybe finding a different pathway rather than referring them to the criminal justice system on how to deal with, if their behavior gets out of line. And so it's an incredible program. I know that our high school SRO is also a football coach, coaches on our freshman football staff. And so, again, just being a member of the community, not only just being a police officer.
And they wear a uniform in the buildings?
They do. They're fully uniformed, look just like a regular patrol officer. Again, there's a lot of discussion over the last few years about what that program was going to look like. A lot of discussions with the community, a lot of discussions with the school district, and we came back to the point that they are a police officer in the schools for the purpose of safety, and so we want them to be equipped like they should be, and they need to and also be seen as a police officer in the school.
So how can we all in this community help young people see police work as a rewarding career? Is there ways we can do things?
Well, every year we host an open house in the first or second weekend in October. It is a program that was started actually in Atlanta, Georgia, and it's called the Faith in Blue Weekend. It's a nationwide campaign to open our doors and let people come in and see who we are and see behind the curtain, if you will. And so those opportunities, we do try to do career events and do things. I think the biggest thing in an agency like Tualatin and in a city like Tualatin is, we want our officers to be super approachable. We want people to walk up and say hello. We want people to ask us questions. We want people to call the police when they have things that many times people will see things in their neighborhoods or in the community, and they're like, we want you to call. We want you to be engaged with us. We want you. It's what you pay us to do. That's our job. That's what we're here for. And so we want people to, and we encourage people to communicate with us.
So if somebody had a reason to call, would they call the non-emergency line or the other one?
So if you need the police in Tualatin, you would call the Washington County Dispatch, which is, you call the non-emergency line. They dispatch for all of the county. They're going to send a police officer, or a police officer will give you a phone call if it's a non-emergency, and then we do have that lovely 911 system for any time that things are deemed to be something that you need us right now.
So what would you see as the future at your job there, and some other challenges in the next 10 years, let's say?
I think as the community of Tualatin continues to grow, and it's, what we have a new section of the community down in the south end of town in the Autumn Sunrise community, and some new homes down in that region. Traffic is always an issue in Tualatin, so traffic will continue to be an issue in Tualatin for the next couple of years. As they continue to work on the infrastructure to get things moving. But, as we, more people create more calls for service. And so, our biggest thing over the next couple of years will be using technology efficiently and effectively. We'll be using and, bolstering our ranks in the police department to make sure that we're, have adequate coverage 24 hours a day. We are a 24-hour day, 7-day a week, 365 days a year. We never close. There's always a minimum of 3 police officers working in Tualatin every day, every night. And so making sure that we have adequate staffing to cover those as our demands and our needs continue to increase with the community increasing and more community, more businesses coming in, more industrial areas being built out, all the time. It'll be important for us to keep track and keep pace with the growth.
About how much time is spent on training for an officer in a month, let's say?
So every officer is required to through our state certification, every officer is required to attend a minimum of 24 hours a year of training. So there's 8 hours of use of force training that we have to attend every year. Every officer has to be CPR certified, certified in the use of the AED. We have to attend ethics training every year. We have to attend mental health training every year. So our officers are pretty busy. I would say on an average, even though the state only requires that we train that we train 24 hours a month, I would say the average officer in Tualatin attends probably anywhere from 8 to 12 hours of training a month.
Wow.
Yeah. So through our own in-service training and then external trainings that they attend.
Well, Greg, we sure appreciate your time telling us about your life here at Tualatin and this very important work. So thank you for sharing. Anything else you would like to add?
Well, I can't thank this community enough. Again, growing up in this place, the members of this community are phenomenal. And, going to school here, now working here, living in the neighborhood that I grew up in for many years, and just the connections that were made. It's an amazing community, and I'm super proud to be a part of it, and I'm incredibly honored to be the chief of police. So,
well, we're glad you're here too. So thank you again.
Thank you.